Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlecoff to get notified when I go live. What is going on, everybody? John Middlecoff, 3 and Out Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you may subscribe. Apple, Spotify, we got you covered. Big show coming up today. A lot of football talk, some NFL thoughts, something on college football and Nick Saban's impact off the field. And then, of course, we will just dive into some of the news and notes around the league. But if you're watching this on YouTube, hammer that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a comment below. TheVolume.com, we got you covered with merch. As you can see, I got a 3 and Out hat on right now. FlexFit, no big deal. Go to TheVolume.com, get yourself a hat. We got trucker hats as well. And yeah, so let's rock and roll. But first, let me tell you about my friends. This Saturday night, I plan on going to watch my Fresno State Bulldogs get their second Power 5 win in 3 weeks. They beat Purdue week 1. They plan on beating ASU Saturday night. And I plan on attending. And the way I plan on attending is my smartphone, because I downloaded the Game Time app, who happens to be the official ticketing app of this podcast. And when I downloaded it, I signed up originally back in the day for a pair of spring training tickets. If you want to go to a football game, are you a Swiftie and a Chiefs fan? You want to watch the most powerful couple right now in America, Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift? Well, you can go to both. You can go to a concert. You can go to a football game. You can go to a World Series. You can go to a comedy show. You can do anything with Game Time. Interactive ticketing map tells you all the best prices, all the hottest deals. And when you use the promo code John, that's promo code John, just my name, JOHN, you get $20 off. You can't beat that. $20 off in these inflationary times. Every dollar helps. And get outside, have a good time, enjoy yourself, and do it on us. Download the Game Time app, fastest growing ticketing app in America, promo code John, and go do something. Okay, I wanted to start with the hype machine. And let's face it, the impact of the offseason because of the distance between games can get pretty outrageous, right? And I think we saw it somewhat this offseason with the Chicago Bears. They make a big draft day trade. Their general manager is, he's willing to say some pretty bold comments. He did when he was hired about eventually running the division. He did this offseason about how hard he was working, evaluating the draft. They obviously have Justin Fields, who once upon a time they traded up for, highly touted prospects. Like, the Bears could be good this year. And I think sometimes we talk about GMs in general and what their job is. Like, if you make a good draft pick, right? Like, look at who we found in the second round. Like, the job of a GM encapsulates so many things. First and foremost, it's hiring the coach. Second, it's running the entire roster. So that free agency, trades, the draft. It's not just like, well, he hit on some draft picks. Well, who did he sign in free agency? Has he ever made any waiver claims? Who's he make trades for? And I think sometimes the hype machine with a franchise that feels a little dead, especially a big market franchise. I think you see it sometimes in the NBA, like with the Knicks. People desperately, this year they actually were good, but for a long period of time, like, this could be the year. It's like, have you guys looked at their roster? They're not going to be any good. And I'm pretty unbiased when it comes to football. Like, if you got a good team, tell you got a good team. And listen, I can be wrong sometimes. We'll see on the Miami Dolphins. But I've never acted like the Miami Dolphins stink. Do I think they're probably closer to a 9-win team than a 13-win team? I do. But time will tell. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to wave my hand and say, God, I missed that one. Because I love Vic Fangio. I like Mike McDaniel. I just don't quite see it with their personnel on defense. But who knows? Now Aaron Rodgers is gone. Maybe they cruise that division. With the Bears, this one was a pretty easy one for me. Because the hype machine this offseason was outrageous. People were picking, and I love Justin Fields coming out in the draft, but I've loved a lot of players that didn't turn out to be very good. And I've questioned a lot of players that turned out to be pretty good, right? So this is the way football works, whether you're a GM or whether you're just a fan sitting on your couch. We all have opinions on football. And then over the course of time, when the games happen, we're either proven right or proven wrong. It's the fun part of watching sports, right? You get to have takes. You get to have thoughts. You get to root for a player. You get to root against a player. Now, GMs have skin in the game, right? They're no different than you. They like certain guys and they dislike certain guys. They just have the power to add them to their team. And there was a video that went viral over the last 24 hours, and it was of Chase Claypool, a player that the Chicago Bears last year traded a second-round pick that turned out, wait for it, to be pick 32. And this video of Chase Claypool, and once upon a time, I watched a lot of all 22. I spent basically every waking hour in the NFL watching all 22 tape on either college or a lot of time when I worked in the office, professional players. And it can get pretty monotonous and redundant and kind of boring at times because especially when you're just a random scout, you're not spending most of your time watching Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Donald. You're watching a lot of random guys. And Chase Claypool would be a guy that every team in the league this year will evaluate. Why? He's going to be a free agent. And I got a news flash. The Bears are not going to extend him. This video on Chase Claypool is one of the more embarrassing things you'll see. And this gets back to the organization. You're only as strong as your head coach and your quarterback. And a lot of teams, like, your GM plays a pretty big role in that too. And clearly right now, the Chicago Bears have question mark at quarterback. Very talented individual, but is he good enough in the passing game? And right now, I think it's more than up in the air that he is. Most people, the evidence we have, he's not. But anytime that you attempt to surround a player, like part of being a GM and part of being that kind of group as the head coach and the GM is having a direct idea and a specific idea of the type players you want. Not just from a physical standpoint, right? Height, weight, speed, all that crap, but their football character, how hard they play, how much football means to them, how willing they are to do absolutely everything to improve at their craft. Because once you get to the professional level, if that's your mindset and you have talent, sky's the limit. You make millions of dollars, you become a star, and you become a productive player, in the most watched league in America. And the Pittsburgh Steelers now have a long history of knowing what they're doing when it comes to personnel departments. They find a lot of gems in the draft, and when they don't work out, if they get rid of a guy, it's usually, to me, a red flag. And Antonio Brown had a 6-year stretch, which, just Google his stats, it's one of the best stretches you'll ever see in football history. And then when they were willing, obviously it got weird at the end, and they were trading him. When the Raiders were the team that wanted him, I'm like, this is not going to be a good fit. You don't have the infrastructure. You're not a good team. You're not even remotely close to being ready to win. Taking in this personality flyer, and even at the time, we didn't know he was remotely as crazy as he was, and it completely blew up. He was cut before I think he ever played a game. Remember, he showed up in training camp with the burnt feet from the cryo in a hot air balloon. Like, it was batshit nuts. And then a couple days later, he puts out a video on YouTube of his phone call with John Gruden. Well, last year, when the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to put Chase Claypool on the trading block, that should be a giant red flag to any team. Now, I understand, like, it's a very black and white league. You either win or you lose, and you need to acquire talent to win. You can't win with just Johnny tryhards. That won't work. Like, look at the best teams in the league. It's Micah Parsons and Trent Williams, right? And Travis Kelce's and Mahomes. Like, you need elite guys to win in the NFL. And you need elite guys to even just improve in the NFL. And talent, there's a big difference, right? Between guys that are fringe NFL talents and guys that have the NFL, like, high-end physical capabilities. But if you don't like football, if you don't care about football, and you don't play hard, no one cares. And this video on Chase Claypool, to me, you could argue, well, it's a reflection on Chase Claypool, but he's kind of been this guy for a while. The Steelers knew it, and they couldn't have got rid of him any faster. And for the Bears, a team that aren't even remotely close to being good, to not only bring this guy in, but to play him and trade a second-round pick for him. Like, when you're bad, premium picks mean a lot to you. So a guy like Chase Claypool, if you would be interested, should be a team that's much closer to making the playoffs. Never made sense to me. I thought the trade at the time, this is not playing Monday morning quarterback. But then when this happens, like, there's an old adage by Bill Belichick. You're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. So both the guys, the head coach and the GM, kind of have egg on their face when it comes to this player. Obviously, the GM is the guy pulling the trigger to make this trade, which aged incredibly poorly and was awful at the time, let alone right now. It's even worse. And this is a reflection of the coach, because you're either coaching or allowing it to happen, and that reflects you, because this is not peewee football. This is the pros. If he's doing that, you got to get him out of the game. And I know it was easy for him to say that everything's on the table and maybe he'll get benched this week. It's too late. Like, that is, I think the Bears are so far away because they don't even have an identity of what they're looking for. If you're willing to do that and that mistake, they're still a year away from being a year away. Whether this Justin Fields thing, which is not headed in the right direction, but this just shows you. And it happens all the time with like coaching assistants. And it definitely happens in college, the hype machine. And I'm guilty of this. The overall media is guilty of this, is there becomes a hype machine, this coordinator and this, assistant GM. And then you'll talk to a guy for the team. They're like, yeah, this guy's kind of a fraud, or yeah, he's actually not that good. Or sometimes they're like, yeah, this guy's a stud. Love him. But when the hype machine grows, there's just no stopping it. And I think this offseason, the hype machine on the Bears was borderline laughable. It really was. And this, I got no agenda here. There's no bias. Just look at their roster. It's not that good. And it was dependent on Justin Fields taking a massive step just for them to be competitive. And if he's going to play just like he did last year, and then they're going to have stuff like that happened with Chase Claypool, they have no shot. Say what you want about the Packers, right? And we still unknown. Like, I'm not giving them that much credit in terms of Jordan Love, because I think they played one of the worst teams in the league, but they have a clear identity. They know exactly what they're looking for, and they have for a long period of time. From Ted Thompson to Gutekunst to Ron Wolf, they have consistency in their front office. They're typically pretty aligned with the GM and the head coach. And I thought the Packers' performance on Sunday was just like, yeah, that's an organization that has not only a specific type, but they're all on the same page. I think Coward said this, and I agree. Their offense looked disjointed. I'd argue their franchise feels disjointed. And I was critical of the Chargers for having the cheap disease, and that's with the owner. I think the Bears battle this sometimes. There's just a cheapness to their operation. I've known people that have worked there, and it's sad because they're one of the stalwart brands of the league, one of the biggest markets. The Bears, a historic team, but let's face it, for the last the majority of my life, kind of been pretty average. And offensively, they've really, really struggled. And it's not really a secret why they're struggling when you watch a guy like Chase Claypool dog it. Imagine doing that for one of the top coaches in the NFL. Imagine doing that for Bill Belichick or Andy Reid or Kyle or Sean McVay or Pete Carroll. That would never be tolerated. That would never be tolerated. And I know you traded a second-round pick for him. You want to draw a line in the fucking sand? Cut that guy on Monday, because it's not just automatically going to improve. Be one thing if he was a rookie. Guy's been in the league for several years. This is his fourth season. He's in a contract year. He's literally playing for money. I mean, you're actually paying him, and his contract's going to end. He's going to try to get an extension somewhere or have someone pay him. That's what you're tolerating? I never understand when bad teams don't immediately cut a guy in a situation like that. What do you have to lose? More games? You're probably going to lose them anyway. So I think the Bears have major, major problems. Football is back in full swing with another week of epic games. And who's got you covered on the action for every single one of them? DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet $5 on football and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Nobody's missing out on the action this season. All DraftKings customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Get in on the NFL Week 2 action with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N, to sign up. New customers can bet $5 and take home $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See dkng.co/football for eligibility. Terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. I've always found it funny, and I get why coaches do this, is the quote-unquote next man up mentality. And which is the case for a lot of players when they get injured. If your second corner gets hurt or a guard gets hurt, like next man up. But there comes a point when certain players get injured, there just is usually no replacing them. And there are clearly several quarterbacks in the NFL that I don't care who the backup is. It is a gigantic drop-off, and a drop-off that is impossible to bridge the gap, right? There is no, when Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, there is no next man up, Zach. Let's figure this out. Everyone knows. The players, Robert Saleh can say whatever he wants, and obviously every one of us on the outside, they're screwed at the quarterback position. Now, they're not necessarily screwed as a team because they got a really good defense and they got some good running backs. But I go back to the late 90s when Trent Green tore his ACL and Dick Vermeil gave the impassioned speech, Kurt Warner is our quarterback and we will win with Kurt Warner. At the time, do I think he truly believed that? Probably not. But clearly Kurt Warner went on to be a Hall of Famer and it worked out pretty well. When Tom Brady tore his ACL the year after the undefeated season, well, actually didn't end undefeated because they lost to the Giants, Matt Castle came in and they won 11 games. But there is no next man up to Tom Brady, even if it's to Matt Castle. In this situation, I was thinking about it today. If Robert Saleh can keep them above 500, like if the dust settles and they go 9-8 or better, I think he probably got to extend them. I really do, because everyone in that building, I don't care how optimistic he is, and I'm sure he was when he addressed the team on Wednesday morning. Like most teams come to the team meeting to get the game plan before they break up to offense, defense, and the head coach addresses them. Every coach is a little bit different, and every setup of that meeting is obviously different. But I think it's fair to venture to guess that Robert Saleh opened the meeting with some positive reinforcement that we're bigger than one guy, that we have a good enough team to compete. The season is not over. We're 1-0. We got a long season ahead. Everyone needs to band together. And he's not wrong. Like that message, what else is he supposed to say? But these guys aren't idiots. They know. But if he's able to keep and I thought he did an incredible job on Monday night. The team kept playing hard. They just kept themselves in the game. You could argue, and I had people DMing me like, you're acting like Josh Allen played like shit. Why not give the Jets defense more credit? Listen, I'll give the Jets all the credit in the world. 2 of those interceptions, threw it right to the DB. One thing when you break on a route like the third pick by Whitehead, the other 2 are kind of YOLO throws. Like I don't give you that much credit as a defense for YOLO throws. I do give them a lot of credit just for the pace in which they played, the violence in which they play with, and just the overall quickness and just how good they are. Like I'm not just arguing that. But I do think Robert Saleh has a lot on the line this year for a lot to gain. Because anytime you go through a moment like that, like when do you really learn something about yourself, about people you work with, about your significant other? It's not when times are great. It's when you hit adversity, when shit hits the fan, right? When you learn a lot about yourself. I know professionally when I've been fired, when you spend a lot of time in deep thought, when you lose a parent, right? When you go through times that you don't wish upon anyone else, that they're not easy, but that's usually your greatest time for growth. And if you can make it through it, and sometimes it's very, very difficult. I don't care what you do, whether it's a personal situation, whether it's a professional situation, you just got to find a way to make it through it. Now, the hard part about football is like, you can have the right mentality and you can try really hard. If Zach Wilson's going to suck, they're going to be at a huge disadvantage. And we've talked about earlier in the week, like, who should they go get? Like, this is week 2. What are they supposed to do? He's mentioned today he doesn't expect Aaron Rodgers to retire. I don't either. So he's going to come back. You still owe him a bunch of money. You can't trade for any of these quarterbacks making any coin. You already are giving up a second-round pick next year because of the Rodgers trade. You drafted Zach Wilson number 2 overall. You might as well see if he grew at all this offseason, see what he has for a couple weeks but you don't have any other options. Like it kind of is what it is. It's the reason you trade for Aaron Rodgers. It's the reason this game is so fickle that if your quarterback has a major injury, you're kind of on the sideline. But if he's able to keep it just, the boat above water, which is not going to be easy. I don't care how good their defense is. And Zach Wilson just improves enough to make them competitive. I think Robert Saleh can earn himself a contract extension. Right now, it can go the other way, and we could argue they could win 6 games, and it could be just, every game tightly contested, kind of like last year, but even closer. And you go, God, that's still pretty impressive. And I'd agree, right? But I don't know, and it wasn't his fault. It was no one's fault that Aaron Rodgers got hurt. I don't quite understand, and I saw Diana Rossini say that Aaron didn't love some of the blocking schemes with the cut blocks of the defensive linemen. I didn't get why they were going 5 wide, 4 wide, and in the shotgun. Just get under center and run the ball early in the game. Just establish your toughness. But that's kind of irrelevant now because they didn't, and they lost their quarterback to a torn Achilles. So that next man up, it's so easy to say when it's a random guy. And then like Aaron Donald goes down. You're like, next man up. Like, well, what does that mean? Like he's 10% of the player. Micah Parsons goes down. Right. A.J. Brown goes down. Like there is 20, 30 non-quarterbacks in this league that I laugh in your face. Travis Kelce hurts his knee before week 1. Like good luck supplementing that. Right. I don't care how long the Bulldozer and Noah Gray have been around the Chiefs. There's no replacing Travis Kelce. It's impossible. Just like there's no replacing Chris Jones up with his 2 mob buddies who orchestrated one of the worst holdouts in league history. And I'm fascinated to watch. I don't necessarily want to watch the Jets. Like, I'm not that interested really in watching Zach Wilson. I just want to follow the team, right? I don't have to watch. I think the shittiest part about this is if you love football, you're just like, I just want to watch Aaron Rodgers, New Jersey play. Like, I don't care at all about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But when Tom first got there, it was impossible to not be glued. And that's what Aaron was bringing to the table. Now I'm just interested in kind of following the story and not having to be glued to every one of their snaps. Okay, I think after week 1, if we think you're going to be a good team or a competitive team, a playoff level team, we have long heard the stats of being 0-2 in the league. The percentage chance of making the playoffs, I think it's close to 10%. It's a little skewed because now we got the 7th team, right? We have the added wild card spot. And that's only been going now for 2 years. So we have a small sample size, but it's clear. Like if you start 0-2, you are at a huge disadvantage and your margin for error is very, very small because you're really staring 2-5 in the face and you could play well. So I picked some teams this week that I think kind of got to draw a line in the sand. And I saw Trent Williams had a quote about the Steelers is early on in that game, once the Niners took the lead, the Steelers went 3 and out basically every drive to the final drive of the first half. He said by about the 3rd drive, he was so tired because they got no rest. He was rooting for the Steelers just to get a first down. So instead of running 3 plays, they ran like 6 or 8 just so he could catch a breather. Now, he was not saying that like he's not being mean or anything. He's just honestly saying, I was exhausted. It was crazy how fast our defense was going on the field and coming right off. That was an embarrassing performance. Like it, for all the Tomlin games I can remember in recent memory, that was about as gutless of a performance. It's one thing to lose the 49ers. They're better than you. No big deal. It's another thing to just get curb stomped like they did. And this week, they're playing the Browns at home. I like the Steelers in this spot, but I definitely am a little nervous and I said this all week, my preseason thoughts on them. If they don't show and bounce back, I'm probably out on them. Like they'll have their classic start slow and then somehow get to 9 wins and not be under 500, but they already have some major injuries. Hayward, team captain forever, is out. Deontay Johnson's injured. This is kind of I don't want to say it's must-win territory because obviously you still have 15 games left, but you get beat by a divisional opponent at home and you get curb stomped by the Niners. I mean, are we finally looking at a team that's under 500 after all that hype? Again, I'm guilty of it, They better win this week. Seattle. Until I looked at the schedule early Wednesday morning, I was thinking, listen, I rewatched Seattle. I really watched it for the first time. I had it on. If you got 4 games on your TV, it's fun and you can consume a little bit at a time, but it's not the same of just watching a game. Like I had the Charger in the afternoon slate on week 1. I got 2 TVs in my office. And on the big TV, on like the 60-incher, I had the 4 TV box. And then on the little TV, like the 40-incher, I just had the Chargers Dolphins. So I had 4 games going on one and Chargers Dolphins going on the other. It's way easier to follow the Chargers Dolphins game on just the one TV than it is the 4-box game. So I love doing it, but in terms of this show and feeling confident about what I'm talking about, it is difficult to watch and just have like strong takes on the 4-box situation. So I watched the Rams Seattle game, and Seattle had the lead. They were up 13-7 at halftime. And then in the second half, the Rams, a bunch of their random guys played really well. When I say random, like young mid-round picks were making plays left and right. And Matt Stafford was awesome. And Seattle got worked in the second half. Like McVay kicked the shit out of Pete. He really did. He got him on a 4th down play call for a touchdown that Akers walked into the end zone. It was a coaching mismatch in the second half. It really was. Seattle plays the Lions this week. And the Lions are coming off a long week where because it's week 1, I don't know if they're really going to be in the position where they're kind of feeling themselves, right? And the other thing is, and I don't agree with this, anyone trying to diminish the opening game because Chris Jones was in the stands and Kelsey was, in street clothes texting Taylor Swift. I don't buy into that. A win's a win. This is football. You only get so many games. This isn't, the NBA where guys rest every other game. Like, this is the Chiefs are hard to beat. I don't give a shit who's playing. If Andy's coaching and Mahomes is the quarterback, that's a good win. But I think the Lions, and they mentioned this during the broadcast, like season tickets are sold out. The buzz coming into this season is an all-time high, as it should be. I think that place is going to be going bananas. You know, kind of what primetime has brought to Colorado? I think you're going to sense a little bit of NFL version of that with the Lions. This is not going to be an easy spot for Seattle. Now, Seattle's got a lot of good players, but, and honestly, Geno, his stat line was worse. The eye test, he wasn't as bad. Like watching the game, I know if you just go to the box score, it does not look great. He did not look like some scrub, but Seattle better find a way to win this game, man. Because if they don't, with how hard the schedule is, the NFC West, they haven't played the 49ers yet. They've already lost the Rams. The NFC West plays the NFC East. And so they still got to play the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Giants, and they play the AFC North. All of a sudden, that could be one of the swing teams is like Seattle's out of the playoffs and, some new random NFC team is in. So that is a massive game. Now, a game on paper that is a massive mismatch, regardless of what happened last weekend. The Giants have no excuse. They really don't. They're coming to Arizona. If you are a playoff team, you win this game. And honestly, you should win this game by 10 plus, especially after that absolute shellacking that the Cowboys. The Steelers were embarrassed. The Cowboys made the Giants look like a JV team. And for a team that had so much hype that won a playoff game, won a road playoff game, to have that happen to you at home, I don't care if the Cowboys are a lot better than you. That's unacceptable. And clearly anyone that's not a Daniel Jones guy, and I don't blame you if you're not a Daniel Jones guy, everyone was shitting on him this week. Every single person was, and rightfully so, because they're paying him a lot of money. Anytime you get paid a lot, the criticism, the microscope just increases. Everyone's paying closer attention to you. And it's going to be fascinating to watch that play out. The last but not least team, like, listen, I was not one of those people that I could see Buffalo coming back to earth. As long as they got Josh Allen, I'm chalking them up as a playoff team. But that version of Josh Allen, they'd have major problems. And I'm not saying I'm on the Raider bandwagon yet, but I've been pretty bullish on the Raiders this preseason. They just feel, I don't know, more cohesion. Maybe the coach feels a little more comfortable with a quarterback that knows what he wants, even though Jimmy is every bit the roller coaster as Derek Carr. They get rid of some players. They add some guys on defense. Even the Chandler Jones situation last week, which we don't even really have details. Did he just go nuts? Did they say something to piss him off? He clearly is not around the team. He wasn't at the game. He was going to be their starting pass rusher opposite Max Crosby. who might not even need an opposite pass rusher because he was ruining McGlinchey. I think Buffalo, you talk about must win. You lose your first 2 games and you lose your second game at home to the Raiders. There is tangible pressure, not just on the Bills, but Josh Allen to just play dramatically better than he did the other night. Okay, last but not least, I read this article today on The Athletic about the rise of the GM in college football. And when I got hired in the NFL, by my second year, we hired a guy named Ed Manowitz. And he was the director of player personnel, which is essentially the GM of Alabama football. And they had won a couple national championships. And he had worked for Nick Saban, revolutionized the position in college football. Because historically, the main difference, obviously in college, players pick you, and in the NFL, you pick the players. But one of the main differences in a coaching staff in college and the pros is in the pros, your scouts are scouts, not the coaches. In college, your scouts are your coaches. They're your recruiters, right? They're equivalent to your road scouts. They go to the high schools and help you recruit and find players and work with your head coach, who is essentially the GM as well, because he's the guy who has final decision-making power on every player on the roster on who to sign and who to recruit. Well, once Ed and Saban really created this position in 2009, 2010, 2011, so many of Saban's coaches started spreading throughout college football. And because of the success Nick was having, many consider him the greatest college coach of all time, everyone copied what he did. And what he did was build a personnel department. So he essentially had a GM, and then he would take students or student assistants and train them to work with different coaches in different positions. So they would basically have an operation. And this article on The Athletic basically talked about every team now has a GM. And these GMs around college football are making $250,000, $300,000, $400,000. And they are in charge of the transfer portal, high school recruiting, working with their coaches, going throughout the country. My buddy Derek, who works at Florida State, who is the GM of Florida State, has like a team of 15, 20 guys working under him. And before the last couple of years, historically, Florida State, for being a power, program, was actually one of the lower budget in terms of some of their recruiting resources relative to like the Clemsons, the Alabamas, and the Georgias. Now, all these, if you're a Power 5 program and you not only not have a GM or a director of player personnel, but you don't have a staff of at minimum 10 people, give or take, you are way behind the times. In this article, Steve Sarkisian talked about hiring a guy that he needed someone with experience, and he plucked a guy from a different program. Lane Kiffin did that. Georgia did that. They all have these. The guy that originally hired me at Fresno State has been in Oklahoma in that position with Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley, and now Brett Venables, Drew Hill. And their job, and now it's clearly expanded with the transfer portal, is operating just like you do in the NFL. When I worked in the NFL, my first job was evaluate a couple teams, keep an eye on the practice squad, run the boards of any guy that's cut. Well, now these personnel departments, it's not just high school recruiting. If you talk to any of these GMs, and I'm lucky enough to know them, any starter who enters the transfer portal in Division I football, we put a grade on, right? Hell, Florida State took a D2 player. So you're keeping an eye on absolutely everybody. If a guy plays at a Division I program, you're getting eyes on him. And if he's decent, you're giving him up to the position coach, the coordinator, or the head coach. And the only way you can keep track of all this shit, because you obviously still have to high school recruit, you obviously during the season have to game plan for your opponents. There's a lot going on. It's why in the NFL, there is no chance. It's why it was so stupid whenever these coaches would try to be coach GM. It's impossible. Now, there's one thing about like having decision-making power, but you need a GM. You need personnel people. And I think these college coaches realized it because they all copied Nick Saban, that this is the only way to operate. It's the only way possible to be competitive. And I think Nick Saban, for all the credit he deserves on the field, having this dynasty in the internet era, kicking the shit out of everyone he played over, 15-year span, winning all the championships. Even his bad teams are winning 10, 11 games. I think something that he'll never get enough credit for is changing the landscape of college football in terms of personnel departments and in terms of essentially bringing an NFL front office to every team in, Power 5 football. Because in the next 10 years, these GM positions in college football, I would imagine all the big boys are paying over 500 grand. I mean, they are great jobs. You actually have more juice than most people have in the NFL. Like, ultimately, if you're a college scouting director, it's an awesome job. But, you got to go to your GM who then has to work with his coach. Like, in college, you are the right-hand man of the head coach. You're essentially you are technically, a lot of people call themselves the GM, but the closer you get to your head coach, like, he leans on you. Now, it goes on his resume if you pick a guy who's not any good, but you get to have a lot of juice that you might not get in the NFL. So we talk so much about Nick Saban on the field, but off the field, he's been just as impactful in college football.